Alright, hi everyone. I wanted to make a video about LARP safety, and quite honestly, this video is inspired by, that's not the right word, but I can't think of the word that I want right now, by a certain situation that's come up in the LARP community. There aren't a lot of details about this specific situation just yet, and I may or may not make another video later as the situation becomes clearer, but I will say this because I think it's important to do so. Dziobak Studios, that sponsors a lot of LARPs such as College of Wizardry and the Convention of Thorns, has been named as a studio that ignores the needs of LARPers who have been abused at their games in favor of protecting the person on their payroll who did the abuse. So I would not recommend any of their games for that reason. There are YouTube LARPers who have gone to their games and are the people in question who have been abused and assaulted at their games and had this kind of response. I'm not going to name their names right now. One of them has spoken out in a little bit more detail, so if you follow this person, you probably know who they are. The other one has made it clear that they no longer support Dziobak, but they have not made it clear why. But either way, it's not a good situation. So both of these LARPers have done this because they want their viewers to go to LARPs where they will be safe and will feel safe and will not have to worry about being assaulted and then having that experience completely belittled and ignored and neglected. So that made me want to make a video about LARP safety, because LARP safety is very, very important. It's so important in so many ways. And I'm not only talking about physical safety, although that is of course an issue as well. But most LARPs will have rules in place to protect people from being physically injured as much as possible. I'm also talking about physical, as well as physical, I'm also talking about emotional and mental safety. And since so many people who come to LARP are people with mental and emotional issues that they have already, and so many people use LARP as a way to work through those issues, it's important that we be able to do so while also being safe in a safe environment. And so I will talk a little bit about the physical, but I'm also definitely going to talk about the mental and emotional as well. So physical LARP safety is of course extremely important, especially if you're going to be LARPing in a game that has a lot of combat. Here we are. So you may have seen these before. I did showcase them in a previous video. I made these myself with guidance from two of the people in the LARP that I currently play in, who are absolute geniuses at making boffer weapons. And so these boffer fists right here are made with the intention of representing fists, so that if I'm boxing or fighting with my fists in game, I will use these, so I'm not actually hitting anybody with my actual fists. And that is for safety reasons. They're made red with red tape so that they're easily seen and distinguished from any other kind of weapon. The tips, the shaft is made out of, no, I know what you're thinking. No. The shaft is made out of basically what would be like pool noodle foam, but the tips on both sides are made out of a squishier foam so that you can hit somebody with the tip and it's not going to hurt at all. And I made mine with grips. Not all people do theirs, but I made mine with grips because I wanted to make sure that I could be able to keep them in my hands and they wouldn't, fall out. So this is one way of ensuring physical safety at a LARP, is making sure that all your boffer weapons that are actually going to be hitting your other people are made in a way that ensures that when you hit somebody with it, at the very most, they're going to get a light sting. Now, I've never fought with latex weapons. I don't know anything about them. But I assume that they will sting a little bit more, but they are also made in a way to ensure that you're not going to get seriously injured. And at the LARP that I play in, Attaway, staff has all of these rules. You have certain calls that you have, emergency. If somebody calls emergency, all play stops immediately. And we have several players. We have one player for sure who's a trained EMT. We have two other players that we know they make sure before every event we know who these people are. We have two other players who are trained in first aid. And when somebody calls emergency, all play stops and somebody takes charge and they say, you go get the player who is trained as an EMT, you go get staff, you call 911. So all of this is very carefully orchestrated to make sure that nobody else gets hurt and that the person who is having an emergency will get the treatment that they need as soon as possible. There's caution to make sure that you don't run into anything that might hurt you, to avoid an emergency situation, such as caution, there's a fire behind you, caution, there's an actual nest of bees. There's also a rule in game that in game you cannot call these creatures bees, because of a very serious situation, because that actually happened related to people who have bee allergies. You don't want there to be panic about bees if you have somebody who has a bee allergy, if there are no actual bees. So in game, if we're talking about imaginary bugs, we call them honey bugs, so that nobody gets confused. That is another way that our staff ensures player safety. And that also kind of goes into the mental, the mental and emotional safety, is making sure that nobody panics about something that's not actually happening or not actually present. They all make sure that we know who has allergies. Everybody's supposed to bring an EpiPen. Some players don't. Everybody is asked before game starts, do you have your EpiPen? Where is it? So that everybody else knows where to find their EpiPen. They explain how to use the EpiPen, and all of these things, making sure at all times that their players are safe. At the second event, I got overheated, and I signaled another player that I had to stop, and this player went immediately to staff center, got a staff member who brought me a bottle of water, brought a cold paper towel, helped me get back to the community center so I could sit down, and this was very personal. So they were making sure that I would recover. The player who was who's a trained EMT also came, asked me if I needed any pain medicine or if I had taken any, made sure that if I had taken some before game started, that I wasn't going to take an overdose. And so everybody was very, very concerned about making sure that I was safe and was not going to collapse, and that emergency services were not needed. And this is how it should be. Anybody who tells you that this will break game or this will make immersion less or whatever isn't really concerned about your safety, and you should be wary of that person. So the game that I play in, the staff is really, really great about physical safety, but they're also really great about psychological and emotional safety. There are so many rules, and when I say so many, I don't mean like 30 pages of rules, but I mean that they have covered just about any situation. And there's no sexual content allowed in game, just period. And some people might find that limiting, but I think that that's safest, because it's so difficult to make sure that you're playing that sort of plot and making sure that everybody has consent and everybody is okay. And that's another thing. There are hand signals that we give that we can signal whether or not we're okay. Thumbs up means we're good. thumbs to the side means I don't know. I'm kind of uncomfortable, but let's keep going for now. And thumbs down means this is not comfortable for me. I have to stop. Leave this scene. No questions asked. And that's good as well. That's what I had to do when I was overheating. I had to, I called out to the player in front of me and I was like, I have to stop. And, I personally have no problems explaining why I have to stop, but that is the rule. No questions asked. You do not have to explain why you want to stop a scene. So if it's a psychological or emotional reason and you're not comfortable with sharing it, you don't have to. And that is, again, the way it should be. You should not have to explain why you need to stop a scene to stop and leave a scene. And again, anybody who tells you that you should does not have your safety in mind. They just don't. But going back to the rules, there's no sexual content. Everything has to be consent, even to touch another player. Even when you're in character, you have to have consent for that. At the last event, when my character had surgery, the player playing the grower who did the surgery on my character had to stop and ask, do you consent to physical role play with me? And that's important. Some people would say, well, obviously you're going to consent because your character, it needs the surgery, and what are you going to do if you don't consent? But it doesn't matter. Getting consent for anything is the right thing to do, period, full stop. And it goes so far to protecting people's psyches and their emotions and their souls, quite honestly, in the end. So, like, if you believe in a soul, that protects that person's soul. And so anybody, I'm going to probably say it 10 million times, anybody who says that you don't need to do that does not have your safety in mind, and they're not thinking about you. So there you go. And that goes for not only other players, but for the organizers, the staff, the company. If it's a big blockbuster game that's run by a company, it goes for anybody. And that's why the situation with Dziobak is so devastating for a lot of people, because Dziobak is a really big company and they do a lot of really big, really exciting blockbuster games. But it's become quite obvious through this situation that, again, I may or may not speak on more as more details become available, that they're not really concerned with their players' emotional or psychological or even physical safety, because from what I understand, this involved an assault, a sexual assault, that the people in charge of this company neglected to do anything about. They completely ignored it, and they protected the abuser in question. The abuser was on their payroll. I don't know if that had anything to do with it, or if they just didn't want to believe it of that person, or why, but it doesn't matter. What matters is they had at least one person, possibly two, probably more, who haven't spoken out yet, who experienced something physically, psychologically, and emotionally damaging at their game and did nothing about it. And in fact, said that the person who abused them was more important than their player. And that is not right. That is not how LARP should be. You should always feel safe, comfortable, and protected at any LARP that you play at. If you go to a LARP and you feel like you're not safe, and you feel like the staff there is not concerned with your safety, then don't go again. And in fact, you should leave immediately. The moment that you feel uncomfortable and feel like the staff is not listening to you or taking steps to make you feel safe and comfortable, you should pack up your stuff and leave. Period. Don't ever put yourself in a situation where you feel physically, psychologically, or emotionally uncomfortable and unsafe. Just don't. You are important. You matter. And so does your safety in all ways, all aspects. safety is so important. You know, I hope that this video, it's very quick. I know it's only about 15 minutes, but I just really wanted to address this issue. I mean, I'm a newbie LARPer myself, but I know that I would not want to play in a game that I felt unsafe at. And I have been so lucky, and I have said it before, and I will say it again. I have been so lucky to find Attaway and join it as my very first LARP ever, because the staff is amazing. They care. They want you to feel safe. They want you to be safe. And both are important. Feeling safe is just as important as being safe. And the staff at Attaway want both. So again, just keep your safety in mind, and do not, please, for your own well-being, do not ever let anybody tell you that you're safe when you feel you're not, because what's most important is how you feel. And if you do not feel safe and nobody's listening to you, get out of there. I love you all so much, and just remember that you are made of stardust. Bye.